Yeah, he's cooked. It's almost impossible to get out of one of these indictments, let me tell you. All right, we're gonna look at a stock called Cassava. Cassava is pretty controversial. Okay, so this is a $1.4 billion biopharma company, which is not a small company. And this is a very controversial company, if I recall correctly. I remember when it used to be called Pain Therapeutics, and I remember when they pivoted a bit to this new kind of drug. They have $200 million in cash, so we know the company's worth at least that much, but they're probably gonna burn some of that. Remy is very notoriously cheap, which I think is usually a good thing. It's like, looks like it's like kind of highlighted. Do you see what I'm saying? So of course, Cassava's just got one, I think they've got just one drug. And there's a lot of drama here. Somebody got arrested. Ooh, government investigations from the DOJ and the SEC. Simuflam or something like that. Simuflam. I'm new to looking at this closely, as you can imagine. I'm very skeptical of it just off the bat. Alzheimer's disease. They're gonna settle with the SEC about the phase 2, and there is an indictment of Dr. Wang. Never good when your scientific collaborator gets indicted. Dr. Yang? Do I get that right? Yan Wang. Okay, this thing's gotta be a 0, right? Serial deceit. There's a website called cassavafraud.com. Never good for your stock. These look like they're down or removed or something. There's a presentation. Oh, this is funny. This is called Simuflam Flam or something like that. Yeah, Simuflam Flam. Flim-flam. Here's the molecule. Okay, so there's some whistleblowers. Some people attacked this thing. So a lot of these papers have been, I guess, retracted. This is the guy. That's Remy. Remy's not a scientist exactly. So this guy, this lead scientist for this thing, is going to trial. I guess I can look this up on Pacer. Let me see if I can get the indictment exactly. All right, how do I search for a case? I think they said it was Mississippi. No, wait, not Mississippi, Maryland? Maryland court? Kind of bizarre to get indicted in Maryland, but... Oh, well, I guess NIH is there, technically. People choose, someone's asking why would 90% of people choose to continue in an open label study? That's basically irrelevant. Sorry, I know a lot about biopharma. You clearly don't. SAVA bulls. Who would be bullish on this? Like, I've looked at it for 5 minutes. Confirm the mechanism of action. Stop it. Stop it. All right, let me see if I can find this indictment. Never good to have your chief scientist indicted, by the way. All right, let's read this. Defendant, I don't know how to say this, Ho-Yan Wang, resided in Philly and worked as a tenured professor at, of course, the school I graduated at. University is a New York State public university, receives state and federal funds. In addition to teaching duties, he ran a laboratory in neuroscience. Company 1 is Cassava, focused on Simuflam or whatever for Alzheimer's. Company 1 also worked on a test for Alzheimer's. Beginning in 2005, Wang was a paid advisor and consultant to Cassava. In his role, he served as a scientific investigator on various projects and helped Company 1 secure federal grant funding for scientific research. But by the way, I've gotten one of these. It's not fun to get indicted, so it's problematic. Yeah, I've shorted stocks like this and made, I don't know, in aggregate, maybe $200 million. The scheme to defraud from in and around 2015. Now hold on, I think this drug goes back to before that, so I want to make sure that we get our dates right. May 2015, and I like this because unfortunately for the last 7 years I've dealt with documents like this and evidence and criminal investigations and things like that. So for me, this hits home. From in and around May to at least April, Wang fraudulently caused to be submitted through Cassava grant proposals to NIH based on purported scientific research involving Simuflam, including Western blot. NIH awarded Cassava $16 million in funding. They were initiated electronically from Maryland, and Wang was indirectly paid. I don't think he was paid very much, but he used the grants from CUNY for his salary, assistance, lab, etc. Okay, made false statements about the mechanism about the drug. Mechanism is one of these things that's not always clear. Drug names are complicated. They're sort of a hybrid of class name and then the prefix is usually whatever you'd like to try, but the suffix is typically set in stone by, there's two naming committees, USAN and ICANN. So they lied about the mechanism, which isn't that big of a deal. So the improvement of certain indicators associated with advanced Alzheimer's in patients treated with drug A, that's a lot more serious. Scientific fraud for mechanism, it's not, as bad. I think every scientist has been guilty of that. But once you're dealing with patients, a little bit different. Mechanism by which test A was designed, not that big of a deal. And again, we're interested in the stock more than we are in this guy's livelihood, right? Nature and scope of his scientific experiments, including the truth and accuracy of the images and information provided. Okay. Fabricated results of scientific research to NIH, including Western blotting. He manipulated images of Western blots to artificially add bands, subtract bands, change their thickness and darkness. A lot of people do that, unfortunately, in science. Failed to keep the original data, failed to provide the data. 2012 article. So doesn't seem, both of these articles contain fabricated images. Okay, so this goes back to 2012. And to give credit where credit's due, I mean, just because a Western blot isn't right doesn't mean everything's wrong, right? I mean, it certainly isn't good, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater just yet. You probably can throw out the baby with the bathwater at some point, but you have to be, a little open-minded. Just checking, every box. Okay, there's the fraudulent Western blot over here. These bands represent the thickness in the chromatography column. You run the gels and they aggregate in the place of size exclusion, so you could determine the weight of a protein or something like that. After a number of these scientific journals communicated concerns raised about certain Western blot images, journals requested that they provide raw, uncropped copies of Western blot. He sent them additional Western blot images fabricated. Yikes. Major fraud against the U.S. That's a rare, by the way, fairly rare charge. Wire fraud, a little more common. On wire fraud, they have to get him on depriving the property of others. I guess that's not that hard. Yeah, he's cooked. It's almost impossible to get out of one of these indictments, let me tell you. Once the government gets their claws in you, it's basically over. All right, here's the court listener. So you got the indictment. He's got an attorney. I've never heard of these people for what it's worth, but maybe they're good attorneys. I wonder if Cassava's paying for his attorneys. A lot of attorneys. They had the indictment for about 2 weeks before they unsealed it. Case is proceeding, probably trial, late next year, early 26. So not good, but let's, keep an open mind. Log P is basically, lipophilicity allows molecules like this to cross the blood-brain barrier. So if you can't cross the blood-brain barrier, then you won't be able to treat Alzheimer's disease, since the drug needs to theoretically get inside the brain. So the brain is sequestered by something called the blood-brain barrier, which is endothelial tight junctions, which limit the ability for any molecule to traffic across the blood-brain barrier that's at least below a certain size range and below a certain lipophilicity range. Some ACE inhibitors cross the blood-brain barrier, some don't. It depends not just on lipophilicity, interestingly. There's topological surface area, there's hydrogen bond donors. There's a lot of little things that come into play. But in general, if you're below 1,000 Daltons and you have lipophilicity of 2 or more, you're going to get across the brain. But not always, and that's why actually targeted ultrasound has an interesting ability to open up those tight junctions, at least temporarily, before they close again. There are clinical trials here. We should look at the clinical trials. That's, to me, the most important thing in any medicine, right? Let's see. So we've got a couple of clinical trials listed on ct.gov. All right, so there's a phase 2b study, N equals 60. That's a small trial, mild to moderate. Now, I happen to know a lot about Alzheimer's. It's one of my favorite subjects. It's very important for companies to publish or present their medical research. Press releases aren't enough. And I say that as somebody that typically doesn't like the establishment, but medical research is really important. Cassava, what is it, biosciences? Do they have a, oh no, Cassava Sciences, okay. Remy resigned? When did Remy resign? Remy resigned from the company he started? Imagine this, okay? I'm going to be a little outlandish for a second. So Cassava is trading at 28 bucks, right? What if you bought the 20-cent? All right, what if you bought puts for 20 cents? Feel me? The price of Cassava right now is like 28 bucks. Price after failure. And I'm about to put you on the game, bro. I'm about to put you on the game. I'm about to teach you how to become rich. You know, quite frankly, I care about my colleagues more than I care about you guys, because these are like my brothers. I want them all to see this, because this is something I learned over a long period of time. When this company's fake drug is exposed for being a fake drug, because it appears to be a fake drug, I'm not 100% sure yet, but I'm at least 50% sure this drug don't work. The stock's gonna go from 28 to 4, all right? 28 to 4. Now let's say you bought these 25 puts. Right now they're 20 cents, but you know, they expire when do they expire? In 3 days. But you don't know when it will be revealed that they're just fake. It could be fake tomorrow. It could be fake next month. But let's say by Friday it's proven to be fake. Very unlikely. Very unlikely. But let's see what happens if it's the case. Now remember, puts are traded in 100 lots. So it's $20 to buy one of these things. Okay? But what is the value of a 25 put? It is $21. So you would turn $20 into 2100. 2100. NINCF kind of over long term. Okay, so that's 100x. Now, again, the chances that this thing, the house of cards falls by Friday is almost nothing. But imagine you take a little 20,000, you buy 1,000 puts. Yeah, I'll look at that, Royce. We'll look at that in a second. That's a good question. We'll definitely look at the phase 2 studies. Open label studies, as you know, are not very valuable. Placebo-controlled studies are the standard. But we will absolutely look at that. Any clinical trial ever, we have to look at really carefully. Stop looking at the background. This guy Wojciech, probably a computer science genius, is looking at, what are you scraping in the background, Martin? Don't worry about that. Scraper Chad is in the building. This is you, Wojciech. You're a virgin API consumer. You need everything in JSON, perfect payload. You follow the terms of service. You can't stop me. Parsing with regex, baby. Can't stop me from scraping, unless you want to take your website down. Yeah, I like that, JLox. Buy $20 every week until it works. So that's August expiry. Let's look at the September expiry. This is not the September expiry. This is actually the September 6th expiry. And let's look at the 15 puts again, or the 25 puts. They are 75 cents, significantly more expensive. But again, the value stays the same. It's going to be $21. Would you like to turn 75 cents into 21 bucks? Yeah, I would too. Now, whenever that's happened to me in the past, and it's happened, you get lucky. 𝗥𝗚𝗃, the devil's in the details. Depends on how much you think they'll grow or not grow, or whether they'll reinvest the capital. Whenever that's happened to me, it's generally been luck, right? I don't know for sure that it's going to happen. Then you have the 996, 20 puts. These are 10 cents. The 20 puts are 10 cents. And they would be worth $16. All right, so will this all crash by September 6th? We don't know. Will it all even crash by Christmas? Let's take a look. What are the prices? The more time it takes, the prices go up insane. In fact, the prices are really high because Wall Street's pretty convinced eventually it's going to crash and burn. So here's the December 2024 25 puts. They're $11. Isn't that crazy? 25 puts only going to 21. That means Wall Street thinks there's at least a 50% chance that this is all going by Christmas. And there's no guarantee that's the case. No reason that can't happen in January or February. So there's a really, really high likelihood this will fail just based on the market pricing. Now the market's not always right. The market's always right. No, the market's not always right. But let's see what the 20 puts are priced at. So I don't know that there is even a trade here. I think factor investing is fact, not fiction. But you have to be, it's like anything else, the devil's in the details. So the market's pricing the 50-50 failure by December. Yeah, we looked at the fraud, Jesse. Were you one of the guys that did the Cassava fraud thing? Yeah, there he is, Jesse Brodkin. Welcome, Jesse. One of the whistleblowers or researchers that exposed this shambolic charade. Shambolic is a word that Remy once used. I'm guessing that's the allusion there. I'm sitting here just shocked that Remy would quit. I know Remy. Remy was my old boss's college roommate. You are not taking into account the worth of the company. Listen. Maybe you're not talking to me. I do mentor people that have a lot of potential. They're all around me. They're around me as we speak. So I met Remy 25 years ago. He's a nice man. I don't have anything against him at all. In fact, I like him quite a bit. Every time I talk to him or whatever, he was good-natured. Like I said, he was college roommates with my old boss, who was one of the most successful hedge fund managers. You know, Remy was a sort of shrewd entrepreneur, but the fact that he quit, Remy's not the kind of guy to quit. And he didn't have a quote leaving the company that he'd been at for 25 years. I think that's a good point, Jesse. I can only take my dealings with the guy at face value. Pain Therapeutics is kind of my experience with Remy. But again, it's shocking to me that he'd resign from the company he started, I want to say 30 years ago, without even a comment. Would you do that? I didn't know the CDO was his wife. I've been out of Remy's circle for a long time. I actually, interestingly, the last time I talked to Remy is I had started my drug company. I'd been dialing for dollars, looking for investors. And I called Remy. And he said, what's the valuation? And I said, 20 million pre-money. And he was so aghast at that. He thought that was way too much. In fact, I should have the email somewhere. And he was upset at that. And then, of course, my company goes public and it's worth like 300 or 400 million 2 years later from 20 million pre-money. So he might have missed that one, but regardless, this is the weirdest press release. This is like the press release before impending doom. This is not the press release you write. Single-minded commitment to scientific rigor and honest transparency. Our sole mission at this time is to determine whether Simufilam, I really have to learn how to pronounce this, Simufilam is effective. That's the way I would redline that. Just is effective. That's it. Instead, they wrote, whether Simufilam is an effective revolutionary treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Come on, bro. You already got people getting indicted. just chill, with the revolutionary. I think I met Barry a long time ago. He's a well-regarded guy. Professional dude. Not a... Oh, yeah, that's right, because, I met him through a few Simufilam, fine. We went through the indictment. We actually got a copy of the indictment, which is pretty tough to find online. And we went through that. It seems like they focused on the Western blot fraud. There's been a lot of Western blot fraud over the last 20 or 30 years. Well, there's been a Western blot fraud since the start of Western blot imaging. But the last 5 years or 10 years, there's been an effort to uncover this fraud. How's Barron and his trust fund friends doing? I don't want to hear that name ever again. So the guy gets indicted, and 2 weeks later, they all leave. No comments by anyone. All right, let's look at the trials. All the innuendo kind of is interesting, but medicine is medicine, and it's not hard to figure this stuff out. Mechanism of action. Well, I've gotten US patents for inventing new molecules from scratch. I know chemistry, I know methods, I know biologics. I've invented some of those. So I know how to make a drug from scratch and get it. In fact, I got a drug from preclinical to FDA approval called sparsentan. I named it. There's not too many people that could do this better. And I've also been around every Alzheimer's drug since day one. All right, so this is a 52-week study called Rethink, NCT 0499, 4483. and then refocus. To me, the resignation before the trials come out indicate me that, like, I mean, the odds that this drug works is like 1%. A lot of people say to me, well, you don't know if the drug might work or something like that. Here's the thing. This is kind of like saying, I'm going to take this Red Bull, I'm going to roll up my sleeve, and I'm going to throw it, and it's going to land on the moon, right side up. It's very, very unlikely. And it's not very logical to use the argument that, well, you don't know if that might happen. What if it happens? Well, I can tell you that the probability that that happens is very low. In fact, if I said that I'd throw this can of Red Bull just 4 feet over there, and it would land straight up on its side, well, that's got a higher chance than landing on the moon. Especially if you saw how scrawny I am, you'd say there's no chance. But the atmosphere would have something to say about that too. And so at the end of the day, like, just because something can happen doesn't really speak to the likelihood. Making a drug is very hard. Making a drug that'll stop a disease is extremely hard. You have to have a rational mechanism. You have to have a rational clinical trial that exposes that drug and its mechanism to the disease, it interferes with the disease, and slows it down in a clinically palpable way. Think about how hard that is. It's about as hard as me throwing this can of delicious Red Bull onto the moon. It's really like that hard. It's like landing a rocket right side up. I mean, everything has to go perfect. And I already noticed the log P of simuflam, or whatever, is just 1. I want to look at the metabolites too, because it's not lipophilic enough to even get in the brain. No decline in cognition score in patients with mild Alzheimer's disease who received simuflam. So this is a subgroup analysis. It's funny, I remember the old naloxone, naltrexone kind of pain therapeutics. Okay, so half the float is short. Yeah, this is gonna be some good money right here. Yeah, sometimes my experience with those kinds of things, Shane, is that they can be buys. I think the results here might come out earlier than we thought, than we think. It could also come out later than we think. But this is a squirrely situation. It's squirrely enough that, I mean, when you have the DOJ involved in your clinical trial, it's not good. I can tell you from personal experience. You don't want the DOJ involved in anything you're doing. All right, so this is like probably some of the meat of the data that we care about. So let's try to really get our head around this. Again, it's not easy if it's not published or presented or anything. Randomized, okay, so the randomized placebo-controlled withdrawal phase sounds like that could provide reasonable data. I owned Repligen shares. You're looking at the wrong REGN. I was actually short Regeneron 20 years ago. And then after their obesity study failed, they went on maybe one of the most legendary successful runs ever. So is this a whistleblower affidavit or CP or not? CP has got another bad thing in the Department of Justice. Somebody got indicted. Yeah, I'd short this. What's my favorite kind of math? Number theory, I'd say. Patricia? This is a senior, very senior FDA employee. The FDA people are extremely honest. They're not like normal government people. They're unbelievably honest. It's tough. I hate to say this because, again, I know some of the people involved, but Burns or Barbier, I'm looking to do a plea deal to not get indicted. You can plead guilty in a plea deal for lesser sentencing. God knows we've seen that a million times. 157 patients, or was it 220? Don't know. At least here, you had 0.9, okay, 6-month change in 8S-COG, 100 mgs, n equals 78, 0.9, and then placebo, n equals 77. Is this 100 mgs QD or BID? Okay, negative 1.5. So this is not a meaningful amount, by the way. So when they say 38% in favor of drug, that's not really. Now this is 8S-COG 11. So is it 0 to 11 or 1 to 11? You can't look at a subgroup That's not really legitimate science. You have to look at the intent to treat, because if you're looking at the subgroup, you should have known in advance that the subgroup would have worked. And there's a whole school of statistics on this about multiple comparisons, Bonferroni correction. Anybody skilled in science knows this right away. Post hoc say, oh, this subgroup did really great. Well, what about, therefore, then the subgroup that didn't do so great? Well, we're not going to look at them anymore. Well, did you know ahead of time which would be which? And can you prove that that's going to happen again? It's nonsense. You would have just done mild. Oh, 𝗕SCOG-11 is 11 questions. Okay, so this is clinically meaningless. So you're talking about 19.3 and 21.9 becoming, get this, 18.4 and 20.4. So this dropped 7%. This dropped 5%. That is not clinically meaningful. You know, using this scale, it kind of looks like it's meaningful, but half a point in 𝗕SCOG doesn't do anything. Look at donanemab. You want to see like a more real drug. Donanemab, which is FDA approved. I think the trial was published in, I don't know, something called New England Journal. Some people think it's important. Some of us that looked at medicine for a while, we like this New England Journal thing. It's not for everyone. I understand. They did 𝗕SCOG-13. So donanemab was 27.6. Mean combined cohort baseline. So this is what, 1 to 1.5 points, and it actually grows over time. So here you're looking at almost 3 or 4 points in 𝗕SCOG. Here, 1.5 here. No, more like 2 to 3 𝗕SCOG points. Or am I looking at the right thing? I am not. That's IADRS. So 𝗕SCOG 4.5 versus, but there's statistical significance and separation. Did they say this was stat sig? Not significant. Ooh. Okay, well, there's this thing in medicine where if the p-value is not significant, then it's basically done. I mean, there's nothing you can do there. It just means the data is meaningless. Usually when I design an experiment, I try to get statistical significance, and there's something called a protocol. In the protocol, you write something called the SAP, Statistical Analysis Plan. And in that plan, you explain that you're trying to get power for a clinically relevant outcome. You don't do clinical trials for fun. They're very expensive. So you do them with the hope of saying, okay, I'm powered to see a 3-point change in 𝗕SCOG or a 2-point change in 𝗕SCOG. The problem is they got a 0.5 point change in 𝗕SCOG. Really, really hard to, I mean, you need a huge sample size to see stat sig on 0.5 point 𝗕SCOG change. If they replicate that data perfectly, who would want to take it? This was a crazy situation. This was a company called Medivation. 𝗕SCOG, this was crazy. Mean difference 𝗕SCOG, 2 points. Stat sig, primary endpoint met. Okay? You would think there's no way this fails, right? It failed. 183 patients. They hit stat sig. They had no problem hitting stat sig. Didn't replicate. 4-point difference? Is that right? 4-point difference. Not a 2-point difference, a 4-point difference. And you're trying to get me excited over, I'm sorry, a 0.5 point difference? So is that what you're trying to get me excited over? 0.6, 0.5 point? By the way, these guys didn't have anyone that, these aren't small tests. It's very expensive to run a trial like this. And look, they hit stat sig. Look at the p-value, 0.0001. Remember, Dimebon didn't replicate. There's no disease modifying. Come on, stop it. The guy who invented the drug is under arrest. He's trying to get less than 10 years right now. He's not doing disease modifying anything. Okay, so if this is the body of evidence that supports the trial, it's a failed trial, right? When it says statistical significance, not significant for sample size, right? Like that's all you need to know. It's not significant. It's no p-value. No p-value means is garbage, as the French say. Garbage. Even when it's stat sig, you can't even trust it. And now you're telling me there's no mechanism of action. So the trial failed, right? It says right here. Not significant. We don't, in this game, we don't do maybes. We don't do halfways. Not significant, period, right? No, it was randomized withdrawal. You do a clinical trial, you can't live by the sword and not die by the sword. You can't do a clinical trial and say, oh, I'm gonna try to show some evidence of success, and when it doesn't show that evidence, you say, oh, whoa, it was just, no, it's not real. This is just a small trial. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. There's no backseas, there's no takebacks. This isn't schoolyard ball, this is the NBA. And it still wasn't even that good. Like, what are you trying to defend? A 0.6 change in ADAS-Cog? So the drug doesn't work by the clinical trial evidence. The PK is suspect, which nobody's talked about but me. Log P 1.1 is not crossing the blood-brain barrier. The founder of the company quit. His wife quit. And the guy who invented the drug's under arrest. This is not what great drug companies are made of. And again, I like to be open-minded. So filament A. Okay. You guys may not know this, but we made drug discovery software. So let's see, is there a crystal structure for this bad boy? Why do you want to see me go to jail? For what? Because I don't like your stupid stock? I've been doing this a long time. I've made so many people mad over the years. You want to see all the stocks I've shorted? Most of them have, unfortunately, are not on the stock market anymore. So you're telling me this tiny molecule binds to this protein. Where? Where? This is a gigantic protein. 2,600 different letters. Which one of these does it bind to? Yeah, this is the data. I'm literally looking at it. This is like, the guy is literally, he's not in jail yet. It's a 99% chance. A lot of these papers have been retracted. This email doesn't work anymore. Acetylcholine receptors don't even have much to do with Alzheimer's, by the way. This isn't a relevant thing. Alpha-7 acetylcholine does not involve in the pathology of Alzheimer's. I mean, most of the people who are long SAVA have like 10 grand in it or something. They're just praying that it goes up 1,000x or something like that. And they've never looked at biopharma. Certainly never done it professionally.